following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. The Comfortably Zoned Radio Network presents The Gall of the Man. And now, the galling man himself, Ralph Zig Tyko.
Tally Olson, I am indeed the man with the gall. The Gall of the Man. Ralph Tyko, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. A lot of my friends call me Zig, and I've been doing this about 6 years and enjoying the hell out of it. Generally, I do it alone. Today, I'm blessed with a guest, a returning guest to the airwaves. He's Jack O'Halloran. How are you, Jack?
I'm well, thanks. How about you after today?
Can't complain at all. It's sunny in California, a little brisk. Northern California, it's like 60 today. But how can I complain? Weather in, we were just talking about Boston off the air. I think the weather is like 12 degrees in Boston, New England, Maine.
I try one right now.
Really? Getting worse. What can I tell you? I'm glad I'm here. And they're there. You're in Southern California, am I right?
I'm in Southern California. A little sunshiny here and about 65 degrees. We're suffering.
Yeah, terribly. Absolutely. Until the next earthquake, and then we stop laughing, or until the next fire.
We don't get that. The fires are a bit of a pain, but they're not out here where I live in the beach. They're out in Malibu.
Right, well, which doesn't necessarily make it okay.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't make it okay at all.
Wherever you are, be glad you're one day, another day above ground, and that means a lot. Jack, there's so much to talk to you about. I was telling a friend, listing your accomplishments in life, and my friend remembers you as a heavyweight contender. He had no idea about the Superman movie, had no idea, in fact, that you are a product of a rather unusual family. You were writing a book about that, or you wrote a book about that. How's that? What stage is that in? And tell me about that a little bit.
We're in like pre-production, putting it together for a film, and we're going to do a series because I have another couple books coming out, and we're just going to tell a lot of truth about things in the country and how they were and how they are now and how they got to where they are right now. And
well, we're going to talk a little current events, but first let me just say, when we're talking about how eclectic, this man remembers you as, what was it, a 10th ranked contender?
Well, I was in the top 10 for quite a few years. Yeah, I was one. It was very found. In fact, they just called me the other day. They're putting me in the Pennsylvania Hall of Fame in a couple months.
Oh, wow.
I was one of 10 heavyweights in the history of boxing that ever became a world-ranked fighter without boxing amateur. Because I never boxed amateur.
Right. You were boxing, but you weren't necessarily boxing in an amateur ring.
Well,
you had some fights in your life.
Yeah. Somebody asked me that one time. Said, "What about your amateur career?" I said, "About 300 amateur fights. You just weren't with gloves on."
Right.
Different kettle of fish. But it was in a time frame when I couldn't box. I mean, even if I wanted to start a career in boxing as an amateur, I couldn't because I was already professional from football. And in those days, you couldn't. See, today you could do that. Today you can be a professional and then go run track in the Olympics and the amateur status, or but you couldn't do that then.
Right.
You were a professional in one sport.
So let's get on with professional football player. We're talking boxer, professional football player. You starred in a feature film. You didn't star, but you were a feature in a real film, Superman. That's a big enough film. You're an author. You're an accomplished speaker. You're very articulate. You really, and you know what surprises me? I meant to ask you this over the few times that I've had you on. You don't picture boxers with all their sense, and could be wrong about that. Football players too. You take a hell of a beating, or you may not have taken much of a beating. You might. What was the worst you ever got hurt in a ring? Did I lose you? Oh, my God. I think we lost Jack. I'm going to put us on hold, take a little station break. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. We'll be back in just a second. We got Jack back. How about that? Jack, a little technical difficulty, and you are here at last. I was just asking, what was the worst you ever got hurt in the ring, or if indeed you ever did get hurt in the ring?
I never really got hurt in the ring. I think in my whole career, I only had 2 abrasions, like little cuts in my left eye up in the meaty part. I think my whole career. I never got stitches. It was never bad enough to be stitched. That's amazing. I was thinking about that the other day. So I never really got any bad injuries or anything from boxing. My biggest problem
head
was
injuries or anything.
Well, I had a disease called acromegalia, which I should never have actually been in a ring. It's a tumor of the pituitary, where it caused like gigantism, like Andre the Giant and all that stuff.
Right.
And it puts you into periods of depression and stuff. And I remember when I went to a doctor when I found out about it, and I went to a doctor, and he said, "How do you possibly fight?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "How can you possibly get your mind into going into a ring and fighting?" He said, "That just seems kind of, wow." I never thought anything about it myself, but it was a debilitating situation, I guess, that you just fought through, but I had it taken care of in Mass General back in '75, so it worked out pretty well.
You don't have any problems ongoing throughout life?
No. Other than the fact that my skeleton is about 65 pounds heavier than it should be because of the density of my bones. Because when you have acromegalia, you put out a phenomenal amount of growth hormone. And I'm probably about 5 or 6 inches taller than I should be. My vertebrae are very big. So it also probably created some of the back surgery. I've had 3 back surgeries. That's probably because of that. But wow. You just work through stuff. You just never think about it.
Yeah. Well, what I started to say before you were cut off, I don't know how much of this you heard, is that I'm surprised you're as articulate as you are, having been a boxer. Football players, boxers, tough professions. You're taking a beating, and there's a lot of head injuries and what have you. I guess what you're telling me in a nice, modest way is you didn't take much pain. You were the one putting out the pain.
Usually that's the way it worked.
Yeah. God bless you. Let me put it to you this way. Another boxing question. I happened to be in 1965 fortunate enough to be in Madison Square Garden for a triple championship. I think it was Emil Griffith was one. It was either light heavy was another one. The boxing commissioner in New Jersey, can't think of his name.
Walcott.
Oh, no, I'm talking more recently.
Oh, Larry Hasner.
I don't know, but 3 boxing championships in one night of boxing at the Garden, and I got to witness that as a 19-year-old right before going into the Air Force. So
it might have been the night Emil Griffith fought Reuben Carter.
I don't know. I don't think that I think one of them got. Did he kill Carter or Emil Griffith killed
Knocked
somebody?
him out.
Okay, that might have been it then. I certainly didn't see the fight where somebody died in the ring about that time.
Oh, that's I remember that fight. Yeah, that was the guy got his arm.
Kid Barrett or something like that.
Yeah, that was Emil Griffith and Benny Perrette.
Yes.
Benny Perrette got his arm cut in the ropes, and Emil hit him and kept hitting him. They didn't stop the fight in time.
Right. I heard that on the radio.
Benny Kid Perrette, yeah.
Yeah, but Griffith fought for a championship. They had light heavyweights, welterweights, 2 or 3 weights that have been created since we were kids, as a matter of fact. But this was back in '65, and I have a vivid memory of that. I remember Don Dunphy doing the fight of the week on Friday nights. I don't know if that reached you where you were, but
they used to do the Gillette fight. The Gillette sponsored boxing every week.
Yes.
That fight, I think it was Friday or Wednesday. I forget. Yeah, but there was once a week. Once a week they had fights on every week. Boxing was a big deal in those days. You didn't get paid a lot of money.
I was going to say, absolutely, and I don't know, what do you attribute? I'm not saying it's a dead sport. What do you attribute the deterioration of the sport? Who do you blame? Anybody specifically? You blame gamblers, promoters? What do you think?
I think that that there's it's come back a lot. I think that because a lot of kids went into other professional sports that were paying big money, and they weren't as brutal. Boxing's when that bell rings, you're on your own. There's nobody calls timeout, and if you pull a muscle or something, the fight ends unless you continue fighting with a pulled muscle. Or if you have a broken jaw or whatever. Whatever happened, cuts or boxing and swimming are probably 2 of the most original solar sports where, when you dive in the water, you're on your own. When the bell rings in the fight, you're on your own. You can't, nobody can replace you. Nobody can, do anything but you. So it's kind of a, I remember when I first started fighting and I was training in a gym in South Philadelphia, and a lot of guys I played ball with the Eagles, they said, "Are you crazy?" So I said, "Yeah, you think you're in good shape, huh? Come on down the ring, down the gym." And I put it in a boxing ring. They couldn't go around. 3 rounds, 3 minutes. They were huffing and puffing after a minute and a half. You know what I mean? Because it's a demanding sport.
My question was going to be, did you get more from your football career from boxing, or did you get from your football anything from football? Vice versa. I'm wording that beautifully. What you get from football from your boxing? What you get from boxing from your football? How about that?
Boxing was the problem with myself was, and I kicked myself a lot because God gave me a natural talent that I abused, and boxing was a day job. Because of my father's world and the things that I did in that world, you had to have a day job. So boxing was. I was just a tough kid who could fight, and I had some pretty good people teach me how to fight well, and I had the ability to pick it up. You know, it's whether you're coordinated enough and you're fast enough and you have certain agilities that allow you, and the way you think, and the way you absorb punishment, the way you think, the way you know, boxing is a great sport, and if you dedicate yourself to it and you do it well, you get great results from it. You know, it's a very satisfying sport. You know, I was so glad to see Pacquiao go back with Freddie Roach, and Pacquiao got his mind really together again, and I knew he was going to beat Broner easy. It was going to be an easy fight for him, and it was. You know, he looked very, very good for a 40-year-old guy. He looked pretty good. You know,
right.
So
Absolutely.
It's a matter of what you put into the sport is what you get out of it, and that's always been that way.
How much of a mental game is it?
It's a big mental game. You know, you have to, you know, it's up to you to focus yourself, and you can't get angry in the ring. If you get mad at your opponent, then he owns you. You know, you got to be. It's about keeping your head together and collective, and focusing on what you're doing. You know, if you get angry and start just wailing away and stuff, you walk into things, and you know, things happen that you don't want to happen. It's a very controlled sport. The same as, you know, football players today are not like the football players when I played ball. When I played football, guys played both ways. You know,
right.
When I was in high school, I never walked off a field except halftime and the end of the game. You know, in college, the same thing. You know, people played both ways. The last guy that played pro ball both ways, I think, was Charlie Bednarik.
I know, we talked about him on another show, and he was an instructor at a camp I attended in the Poconos, Kittatinny, and he'd come up with his brother Truck, correctly, and they would put on a clinic. Chuck could throw further, could hike the ball further in the air than anybody in the camp. He had counselors could throw it overhand. I mean, this guy was terrific, and you talk about agility to play middle linebacker.
Oh, he was an amazing athlete. He was a great athlete.
Absolutely. You played pro football. What was your position?
Talking about stronger. You know, I played defensive end, and I was 280 pounds, but I ran a 4.6 40.
Whoa.
You know, and so the agility and speed was always there, but I practiced that from the time I was a kid. You know, when I was a young kid, I had a mentor around me who was a tremendous athlete, and he had me running wind sprints when I was a kid, 40 yards, 20 yards. You know, because football isn't about running 100 yards. It's about how quick you can get off the ball and how fast you can move the first 20 yards. And what your ability for agility is, moving side to side, and depending on the position you're playing, you know.
Now, you had a very strange professional football career because you couldn't play in the NFL back in those days until your class graduated.
True. That's true.
Talk about that and how it came about that you met.
I went up to the New York Jets. I was asked to come to the New York Jets. They had their training camp up on what the heck was that park? Up on 170th Street somewhere. I forget the name. It's a big park up there outside of Manhattan. And I was invited to go up and try out. And Eubank loved what he saw because I had great speed and size and agility and stuff. So I went through all their drills.
I think he loved your modesty more than anything else.
Well, he just, you know, he said to me, you know, we would love to. So they had a semi-pro league on the East Coast that Jimmy Christie, who played for the Jets, he played in it. His brother Dick Christie, who played for the Jets.
We've talked about this before. Dick Christie played for the Jets, and Jimmy was his brother.
That's correct. They both went to North Carolina. They were pretty good ball players. Or Maryland. Pretty good ball players.
Right. But it was Dick that actually played for the Jets. I remember him. As a matter of fact, Dick Christie played for the Titans before they became a Jet.
Right.
Jet.
Yeah, AFL. Yep.
Yes. They're
also
one of the
played
original.
with Philadelphia. Played with Philadelphia for a while as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He was from Tinicum. They were from Philadelphia. They were from right outside of a Philly place called Tinicum. They went to St. James High School. I went to West Catholic. They went to St. James. But there was a lot of guys like that that eventually played professional football, and they went down and we played in this league, and we played for a team called Tinicum. That was the name of the team in the Eastern Semi-Professional League. And I played for Tinicum, and I played for two other teams. So I used to play like 2 games a week. Both ways, just to keep my levels up, be able to keep your levels up and playing. You know what I mean? Your mind, cognizance, and everything else. Because football is another game of awareness that you have to.
But it's also a game that needs a lot of recovery time. So to play 2 games a week is you were young. That's one thing. But that's a lot of football.
Oh yeah, no, it's a lot of football, with no two ways about it. It's a lot of football.
So now, between the time your class graduates, you're playing semi-pro, you're going to training camp with the Jets and this, that, and the other thing. How did boxing come along?
Well, the year that I was eligible to play, 65, there was a great team down in Philadelphia, and a lot of friends of mine were playing down there. And I said to Eubank, I think I'd like to get down. And Philadelphia wanted me to come down and play down there. And so I said, I'd like to get down and give it a shot. And he said, well, you always have a home here, kid. He said, we can't hold you. You got a home here. If you want to come back up here, we're here. And so I went down to Philly, and then Philly was bought by Jerry Wallman, and he brought this coach in called Q Harrick, who traded a championship football team away. This guy in like 4 months. It was unbelievable. I mean, he made a trade. He traded Sonny Jurgensen and Tommy McDonald to I think it was Washington.
I think.
For their quarterback, who was not very much of a quarterback. Traded 5 of the best young linebackers and 2 guards to Green Bay for Jim Ringo, whose career was over. He traded Maxie Baughan and Irv Cross to L.A. for a kickoff return guy that they never used. I mean, it was appalling. And I come out of a meeting one day with Timmy Brown, and Tim Brown was an all-pro running back. And we come out of the meeting together one day, and Q Harrick walked right by us, and I turned around and said, you don't say hello to anybody in this organization or what? And he turned around and I said, you know what? Take this team and stick it up your – and Timmy said, while you're at it, he said, trade me. And I think they traded him to Baltimore. And I had some friends of mine in Philadelphia, a guy named Sam Margolis and Blinky Palermo, who were boxing czars. And I said to Sam Margolis one day, Ali had just won the title. I said, I could beat that guy. And they said, what a great idea. And they threw me in the gym. And 6 months later, I had my first pro fight.
Whoa.
And I had to come down from like...
It all comes from the mind, though. You said, I can beat that guy. What the mind can conceive, the body can achieve.
Oh yeah, but I came down from 285 to 227. I was like shaking. I said, "Oh my God, man!" And they said, "No, you got to keep that weight down." I had my first fight. I think I weighed 228 for my first pro fight, and then I went up to around 235, and I sat there for a while. It was around 235, 240 most of the time. But I would take a fight on a week. I dedicated myself in the very beginning very, very hard, and it showed because I was just banging people out, and I learned very quickly. I had a very great trainer, and in Passyunk Gym, South Philadelphia. Philadelphia was a great boxing city. There were a lot of great fighters in Philly then, Benny Briscoe and just Percy Manning and Gypsy Joe Harris. I mean, there were just a lot of great. Joey Giardello was still around. There were a lot of fighters down there, and so it became like a mecca. To go to the gym every day was a treat. You had a lot of fun, you know. And I had this old trainer who had like 300 fights, and he worked for Sam Margolis, and he was Gene Johnson was his name, and he boxed with Sam Langford. And he was a real old time, and this guy knew boxing inside and out, boy. And he taught me. He took the skills that I had, and he honed them into boxing, and it worked out very well. You know, so I was like 16-0 the first 16 fights I had. You know, and I was banging, and I was doing very well. And then I got off doing other things, and they weren't really paying you any money. I mean, when I first started boxing, you got $10 a round. Fight a 4-round fight, you got $40. By the time you get paid your corner and stuff, you're lucky you walked away with $18. You know.
So if you knock a guy out, it's to your detriment?
No, it was if you knock a guy out, it made you. I mean, I was looked at as one of the most promising young heavyweights in boxing at the time.
But you're being paid $10 per round.
I was being paid a weekly salary by a syndicate. I had a syndicate that owned my company.
Okay.
They paid me every week, you know. So that's the only reason why I did it. It was owned by a group out of North Jersey. I don't know if you're familiar with the New Jersey area.
Not so much. I know Bayonne, New Jersey.
There was a group out of North Jersey. There was a man that were also involved in Sonny Liston and other people because they were. Sam Margolis was a mob guy, head of the Jewish mob in Philly, and Blinky Palermo was one of the Italian gangsters of Philadelphia. And they controlled Ike Williams and Sonny Liston and a whole bunch of fighters. So they're the ones.
You've told Sonny Liston stories. You call him Charles.
Charlie Liston, yeah.
And you've told Sonny Liston stories on these airwaves. There's a man who has to fascinate me every time I think about boxing. He was so favored against Ali.
He couldn't stand to see his own blood. That was the biggest flaw he had. He did not like to see his own blood or feel his own blood. And when he fought Muhammad Ali the first time, and he pulled that stunt that his shoulder was out and all that stuff, it was because they had rosin on his thumbs. I mean, if you remember the fight, Ali was blinded one round. He couldn't see. But Ali had cut him in the second round under and over his eye. And he didn't like that too well, and he was bleeding through his nose badly. And Muhammad was he was a great fighter. He was a great athlete, you know, and he was beating Liston comfortably. And then he quit on the stool in the seventh round. And of course the rematch came up. And when the rematch came up, Muhammad Ali got a hernia, but prior to the hernia, Liston trained his ass off for the first time in a long time. But the only man he would ever listen to was Sam Margolis. And Sam's wife, unfortunately, had a brain tumor and was going through a very delicate, serious operation. So Sam wasn't around like he was all the time before. And when Ali got a hernia, Liston stopped going to the gym. He took his wife to camp. He just stopped training. And when the fight happened up in Maine, and people say it was a phantom punch, well, it wasn't a phantom punch. When you have a man that weighs 200 pounds with the speed that Ali had, and Liston was ducking up, coming up under a punch, and Ali was punching down, and he hit him, and he caught him square on the jaw. So it was a legitimate knockout. It wasn't no phantom punch about it. He hit him a punch. Ali was just so quick. A lot of people didn't see things coming, but he had that kind of speed, and he had that kind of body agility that when he hit you with his whole body. And he caught.
What kind of a football player would Ali have made?
Oh, my God, he'd have been a tremendous ball player. He'd have been tremendous in any sport. I don't care what sport. He was a great – I'll tell you another guy who was like that was Will Chamberlain. Will Chamberlain was a great athlete. You know, he was a great track star.
I remember him playing volleyball.
Played volleyball. He was a great track star. They wanted him to play soccer. I mean, they paid him a lot of money to do other things, and Chamberlain would never do anything without being paid. I knew Wilt from the time he was in high school. He went to St. Thomas More High School in Philadelphia, and he didn't do very well there with the brothers, the priests that taught there. So he transferred over to Overbrook High School, where he graduated from, and basketball was his deal, man. You know, and he went to Kansas for a couple of years, and but the Harlem Globetrotters grabbed him.
Yes,
they paid him a lot of money. They paid him a lot of money.
Jack, you were a big guy. Did you play basketball at all?
Yeah, basketball was another good sport I played. Yeah. Okay. I played basketball. I played basketball. I held records in track for a long time for the discus. I broke a lot of records in my high school and stuff, and held different records for throwing the discus when I was a kid. I could run the quarter mile pretty good. And for a big guy, I ran like a 10-100.
Wow.
So I was always
carrying a lot of weight as well.
Yeah, well, when I was in high school, I was probably around 215, 220, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And I was played.
For a runner by any standards.
I wasn't,
you've lived a fascinating life, Jack. No question. You're about my age, early 70s.
75.
You've seen a lot in politics and the world situation. Have you ever seen it this bad? Have you ever been as troubled as you are now?
No, I don't like what I see at all. I really don't. I mean, it's when I wrote my book, and when I first went out with the book, and people came to me and they talked to me about it, I said, one of the things you want to look at, and I would always ask somebody, well, where are you from? And the guy would say, well, I'm from New York, or I'm from this city or that city. And I'd say, well, how old are you? And if they were in my age bracket, and I would say, when you were a kid, did you ever lock your front door? Did you get up in the morning and go out and play in the streets and stay out and play all day long and no one ever bothered you? Did you ever see a drive-by shooting in your neighborhood? Did anybody ever burglarize everybody in the neighborhood? Or was the neighborhood watched over and taken care of by certain people?
Yeah, I never saw anything but a zip gun in my life.
First gun I ever saw. First gun I ever saw was a zip gun, and it was a black kid. We used to fight. I lived in a neighborhood that was turning color, So there was always, we had a playground that we fought for the rights to every day. And it was the first time I ever saw a zip gun. And we used to play football game to see who was going to run the playground, or basketball, or baseball or something. And it always wound up into a fist fight. It was kind of a strange era. But one thing there was a lot of respect for each other. We knew each other, and we respected who was who and what was what, So it was a different, we could fight like cats and dogs back and forth with each other, but if some other neighborhood came into the neighborhood, both sides would stick up for the neighborhood. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was a funny way to be raised. And and then of course I was, you're involved in your neighborhood, and then I was involved in another world that those people never knew anything about, and you could never talk about it,
Oh, so you had close friends that you grew up with that you were almost hiding your real you from.
Oh, actually, I always did, yeah. No one ever knew anything, no. I was 14 years old. My father died. And people came and sat me down when I was like just going on 15. I sat down with Meyer Lansky and Frank Costello and a guy named Felix Piquicchio.
For anybody out there listening, the father that you speak of, Albert Anastasia.
Correct. Yeah.
Who basically, and I know this firsthand, ran the waterfront because I have an uncle who was a loadmaster for Grace Airlines or Grace Shipping. And I got to spend a lot of time watching him do his thing and seeing what went on around me. And your dad was running all that. Wow.
He became the most powerful Don in the country, actually. He was his brother, Tony, Tough Tony Anastasia. They did the movie On the Waterfront about him. But he was a college graduate. He ran the union because of my father. My father gave him the strength, and he was, But my father got his first problem on that waterfront. He killed the first guy he ever killed in America, and they put him in jail for murder. And he was up in Sing Sing, and he spent 18 months there, and then Charlie Luciano got him out, and they got a new trial. And, of course, all the witnesses disappeared, so they had to let him go. And they never deported him, though. They had that kind of power, these guys. I mean, the power they had was unbelievable. You got to understand something, that from 1910 on up until 1960, the government, industry, unions, and organized crime were all partners.
How much power does the mafia have now? You told me once they went legit.
They're legit. Now, they have a lot more power than you think they have, but they in a more of a legitimate manner. When you look at Chrysler was run by a guy called Iacocco, and Iacocco come from a little town in Sicily. And he rose up through the ranks of the automotive industry faster than anybody because he had the power of the families behind him. And there could never be a union problem with him because we controlled the unions. So he could control any strike or anything, and that gave him a lot of power. Gave him a lot of, and he was a great negotiator. And he was a very smart guy. I mean, he didn't get the position because someone just wanted to plunk him there. He was a smart guy. He paid his dues, and they pushed him right up the ladder. And there's a lot of.
I asked you not. I have to be delicate with. I feel I have to be delicate with you, or not so much anymore. But early on, I asked you, what was a trait about your dad that we don't know about, and your answer was that he was incredibly brilliant.
Oh, he was very smart. Oh, no, he was very smart. I mean, they couldn't put him away after the first time. He did a couple short stints for gun possession or something like that, but they tried to put him away for murder so many times. And I mean, he ran Murder Incorporated, for God's sakes. And he.
Besides being smart, give me another characteristic of your dad that he passed on to you genetically. It may be genetically, maybe all you've read about him, found out about him, but one of the characteristics that made you successful that he passed on to you.
He was a man of honor. His word was his bond.
Okay.
He was a man of honor. He was one of the real men of honor. He believed in what he did. He believed in the cause that he did it for. He didn't try to justify things with foolishness. It was a black and white, very simple understanding. He lived the code of omerta, and he believed in it to the point of his own death. I mean, he just wouldn't go in the drug business. He thought it was. He made a statement. He said it would be the downfall of the families, and it would be, and our children would touch it. And he said, "We're not in. That's not the game we came in here to play. This isn't part of the program. You know, he thought it was a weak man's way out of things. He thought it was weak, you know.
There are all these documentaries about organized crime. What portrays them accurately and what is absolute bullshit?
Very few of them are accurate. I mean, you got to understand that the government wants you to believe what they want you to believe, and you know, it's like you're at an age you remember the Kiefer Commission hearings, yeah,
right.
When they had Frank Costello and everybody in front of the camera, and they made a big deal out of it. And that was the Kennedys that did that. They made a big deal of exposing organized crime and all. And then my father, they did behind closed doors. And his file disappeared. And if you ever go into the FBI files on Albert Anastasia, you'll see so many black lines, you know, where they blacken things out that they don't want anybody to ever know. You know.
What are some of the things that we don't know about him that would impress us?
He was, like I said, he was a man of honor. If he gave you his word, then he kept it, you know. And it's like people would come to him and say, well, you know, I made a mistake and please forgive me. And Albert would say to you, listen, we have a set of rules. And you were made aware of all the rules before you came to play the game with us. So if you break the rules, you know what the penalties are. Now, if I turn around and I go against the rules that we have set down to give you an opportunity to do something stupid again, you're going to take my kindness as a weakness, and down the street you're going to rat on me. And he was right. Because that's exactly what happened to a lot of people. People did not honor their word. They stopped honoring their word. And to save their own skin, they would sell their mother down the street. Which is very sad. Because when they lived under the code that they lived by, and they did it, when they never harmed innocent people. That was not in the ball game. You didn't have the weapons and stuff that you have in the streets today. You didn't have a lot of things. A lot of things were different.
So the murders that your dad was involved in were all
business.
All business. He didn't go around murdering guys on the street just to be murdering.
Ever, 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 ever. One guy, and he got in so much trouble. That's where they started calling him the Mad Hatter and shit like that. The guy that ratted on Willie Sutton. Willie Sutton was probably one of the greatest bank robbers in the history of crime, and never used a gun. And they could never give him life because he never used a weapon. He kept getting in, and he broke out of every jail that they ever put him in. They couldn't hold him in jail. He broke out of the hardest jail to break out of Eastern State, Pennsylvania, Eastern Penn in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania. He broke out of there. They did a movie about him where he made the mask of the guy and everything, and they thought he was sleeping in his bed. He was already gone. Willie was a very clever guy. And a guy, Schuster, saw him walking down the street and ratted on him. And they made a big thing about it. Television had just started out, and it was a big expose on television. Willie Sutton, biggest bank robber, blah, 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 gets caught by so-and-so, fingered him. And Albert was watching the television station one day when they were playing it, and he said, kill that rat, which was a mistake. But the guy was a rat. The guy really wasn't a nice guy. You understand? So he wasn't Joe Citizen. So, you know, he said to him he was a rat, a stool pigeon. And he said, you know, kill him, get rid of him. And that was the worst thing he ever did, as far as society is concerned.
Beautiful. I learned more from talking
at the church. He gave a lot of money to the church. There's so many things about our society that people are not cognizant of. Although there are people that do know, they just don't ever talk about it. Understand? If you go back in the history of the Catholic Church, and you look at every major city, and all the cathedrals, and all the Catholic schools, they all sat on prime real estate.
Right.
Understand? They paid no taxes. They sat on prime real estate, and they were all protected. Because there was a union between the Sicilians and the Italians that came into the country and the church. A lot of money was funneled through there, through the Vatican.
Now, would you consider that to be hypocritical on one level or another?
Not really, because it isn't that they said you could do whatever you want.
Not from the mafia, standpoint, but from the church's standpoint.
Well, this church's standpoint, my father was a religious guy. I mean, he went to church all the time.
Okay.
And I mean, guys, people went to confession and they confessed their sins. That's what the church, all they ever asked you to do was confess your sins. That didn't say that people didn't turn around and go out and fornicate again or rob a banana or rob this or rob that. They went back and they confessed it again,
And that's their laws, and that's the laws they live by. So,
it's like we used to have a guy. This is a funny story. This is a true story. In Boston, I was hanging around a lot of friends of mine in Boston, and a friend of ours, his brother, was a missionary, big, serious missionary priest, who went to countries and opened up big missions, and we helped them. We actually sent money down and helped them out and stuff like that, and actually went down and sorted out some of the people that were giving his mission a hard time. We made sure they didn't give him a hard time anymore.
That's how you help them more than the money. You sent yourself.
Absolutely. So he used to come into Boston, and we all used to hang in a restaurant. And he would go in the kitchen, and he'd hold confession there. And we go in one by one. And you walk into the kitchen, and he'd just go through the whole, bless me, Father, for all I said and all that stuff. And he would say, "You kill anybody this week?" I'd say, "Nope."
And you were forgiven. You didn't even have to go into church. You did it in the
and Hail Marys for our fathers, and see you later. And you would laugh at it today, but in those days we actually meant what we were doing.
And did you ever use the expression "the ends justify the means"?
Absolutely.
Okay. Just
absolutely
on the same page.
You have to. I mean, you look at the world the way it is today, and let me tell you something. And when Murder Incorporated and all those things were all in place, the government gave out more contracts, and some of the biggest accounting firms in the country gave contracts out on people. When you were doing things in a business corporate structure that was interfering with things, they put hits on your ass.
Really?
I know. I got the envelopes. So they can lie to people all they want. I know. More people were whacked than anyone will ever surmise for so-called justifiable business reasons. You understand?
Whatever those reasons were.
Yeah, and we look at the world today, and I sit back and I really laugh because Law and Order tried to get rid of all their partners and tried to do. I mean, you look at here's something to look at. You're a smart guy. So, what was the first prohibition in the United States?
In the 30s with marijuana,
no.
actually.
No. 1914, there was a thing, look this up on your computer one, they called the Harrison Act. 1914, there was a bill called the Harrison Act.
Okay.
The Harrison Act allowed Big Pharma to become Big Brother. Prior to the Harrison Act, you could walk into a pharmacy and get opiates right across the counter without a prescription. You could get marijuana. Cocaine was already in Coca-Cola. But you know what? There was very little addiction. And in 1914, when they put the Harrison Act in, all of a sudden people had to have prescriptions for everything. Big Pharma was formed. Drugs and money became a big business. And here's the fun part that people don't want to ever recognize or look at. Because by 1940, they were saying, boy, there's so much drug addiction in our country. Well, in 1920, people got married, they never got divorced. You married a guy who was a drunk or whatever, the woman had 5, 6, 8 kids, and she was a housewife. But she was tired, beat up. So she went to a doctor. A guy gave her a prescription for speed to wake up in the morning and Valium to go to bed at night. Well, those drugs are going into her blood, and that blood's going into new babies. So babies are being born with addictions already. No one ever looked at that. 1970, a major hospital in New York did a documentary called The Littlest Junkie, because babies were coming in there screaming and crying. They couldn't figure out what was going on. And one bright doctor turned around and said, those children are going through withdrawal. Their bellies are cramping. And we are not treating it properly. They showed that documentary once and it was never seen again. And you could look the documentary up. It's called The Littlest Junkie.
Okay. I wonder if it's on YouTube.
You understand what I'm saying to you?
Yeah.
Children born of women who were taking drugs in their body were creating an addicted generation.
Is it any coincidence that the drug companies are as powerful as they are today?
And they still are. Look what they do. Look. You see these guys all come home with what they call PST and all that stuff from combat and everything. What do? They give them prescriptions and they mask it. Instead of sitting them down and emptying their subconscious and allowing them to get it out of their system, because it's a traumatic deal to stand there and watch a guy get his legs blown off in front of you, or watch a person
get
your
own legs blown off.
You understand? People, unless you've been in war, unless you've been in that front line, you really don't understand what these guys go through and how many people are ill-prepared to go to war. You understand?
Okay. Hey, Jack, we're up against it. I ask all my guests of late, what do you think the end game will be for Trump?
You know what? I pray to God they leave him. I hope the Soros people and them leave him alone and let him accomplish what he's trying to do for this country, because I think he's going to help us a lot. I really do. I mean, and because here's the beauty of Trump, and I've known Trump a long time. The beauty of Trump is that here's a man who gets elected. He's only the second man in the history of our country that got elected without borrowing a dime from anybody. He owed no favors to anyone.
How about the Russians? Did he owe any favors to the Russians?
No, that's a bunch of bull. I know Putin. I've known Putin since he was a gangster. That's a bunch of bull. He's a businessman. What he's doing for the country is putting business back in order. We stopped manufacturing in this country. It became fashionable to keep people broke because it's easier to control them that way.
Does Putin
credit card industry, everything that our society surrounds with is about keeping people under thumb.
Jack, does Putin run the show? Does he wag the tail of the dog?
In Russia?
No, in the United States.
No.
Through Trump.
No. And I mean, that's a big N-O. capital letters. And I know a lot about Russian, trust me. I remember when they came in this country. I remember when they came into New York. We sold them limousine businesses and stuff. Anything that dealt with cash, they got involved in. And the difference between them and other entities that came in through immigration is the guys who came from the steppes. They killed anybody, men, women, children. They didn't ever care. Cops, they made no difference. The only people they were afraid of was us. Understand?
Right.
But action swung around.
Own Mueller?
Right.
Does anybody own Mueller, whatever his name is?
You know what? I think there were foolish deals made. I think some deals that were. I mean, who made a worse deal than Clinton when he sold half 20% of the uranium to an entity?
Okay. Well,
who knows? How come no one ever looks at? How come no one ever looks at 4 presidents deep the deals that were done to allow immigration to come into the country that got out of hand? How come no one ever looks at the things that were done starting back in the 50s when this country, that is a great country, because we were so strong as a democracy, it scared other places in the world, and all of a sudden, people started inducing socialism into our democracy, and they did it with welfare. Roosevelt had the right idea when he said, listen, you want me to give you welfare money? Go pick up the trash, fix the holes in the streets, get a job, do something for that money. And then that disappeared, and people went on welfare, and they stopped learning how to work. And that was proven when Clinton took it over, and the state started paying the welfare. And I knew a guy in Chicago who had this school out there, and they brought a woman. They took one woman, and they said to her, you got to come in and go classes, and you have to learn how to work. She said, I can't go to that school. I've got my children to watch after. They said, we're going to take your children and we're putting them in nursery schools for you. We'll take care of it. They did everything to get her into a classroom. Well, my eyes are bad. They gave her glasses. Well, I don't have a wardrobe. They gave her clothes. Well, I don't have transportation. They arranged for her to get to the school. Everything to get her in the classroom. She sat there for 4 days, turned around and walked out. And the guy said, where are you going? She said, I cannot learn how to work. And they said to her, but if you don't learn how to work, we're going to take money away.
Pardon me?
They said, if you don't learn, then you're not going to get your checks. You know what she said? The government will never leave me alone. They will take care of me. I can tell you from the 50s and the 60s, women went from Delaware to Massachusetts. At different cities, they stopped and picked up welfare checks.
Is there more corporate abuse of power than there is the people abusing welfare? Don't you think the big corporations are abusing the workers? Don't you think that?
Absolutely.
What's the incentive? Let me ask you this, Jack. What's the incentive for somebody to work when if they go to work for 40 hours a week by today's standards and they're making typical wage by today's standards, they can't afford to pay for a house, pay for their kids, have a family.
But did I say to you earlier, you know, that it's fashionable to keep people broke. So how do you do that? You raise prices on everything. Why do you raise prices on everything? Because we don't manufacture in this country anymore. One of the funniest meetings that Trump had was right before he was elected president. Okay? He had a meeting with all the automotive working guys, all the auto owners in Detroit, He sat down in Michigan, and he had to meet. And the funniest guy that was there was Michael Moore. And Trump, in the middle of the meeting,
he was the one that predicted Trump would win that election before.
Well, let me tell you what happened.
The election.
Let me tell you what happens. They're sitting at this meeting, and Donald's sitting there. Halfway through the meeting, he stood up and he said, "Gentlemen, if you build one more building outside of this country, if you take one more automotive industry product outside of this country and build it, I will put a 35% tariff on every vehicle you bring into the country that's made outside of our country."
Okay.
And Michael Moore jumped up and he said, "You just got my vote, son."
Right.
Understand? Because Obama gave billions of dollars to the automotive industry to pay all their debts off, and they turned around and moved everything out of the country. Michigan.
So what does GM do but a month ago? Did you follow that?
Say that again?
What did GM do about a month ago?
What'd they do?
They went to Mexico.
Hello. And how long did it take to arrange that? They've been doing that for the last 15 years, little by little. How about the buildings that were built in China? How about the cars? It all started with a car called the Mazda. We had the answer. We had the answer to a low fuel consumption automobile with a car called the Corvair. Remember that car?
Yes, front end loaded.
We had the answer. With the Corvair, it was an air-blown, cooled engine, worked like a champion until some
the engine was in the back. If the engine was in the back, and you had to put to keep it on the road, you had to put sacks of rice or whatever in the trunk to keep.
That's not exactly true. I owned a Corvair Spider, which was the souped-up model convertible, and the problem they had was keeping the belts on it because it kept jumping off. The belt kept jumping. But there was a piece that was put on it. But what killed the Corvair was they had gas tanks by the seats, under the seats, and the car blew up, and they made a huge deal about it.
Well, the picky people.
And opened the door for the cars of Japan to come in. Now, hold on a second. Let's go back a little bit. And here you got to know your history a little bit, right? You're a smart guy. The Jewish people of America.
That's just an allegation.
Well, yeah, let me say something.
I can prove you wrong, but I don't have the time.
I'm wrong about what?
You said I'm a smart guy. I just make a little thing every now and again.
You remember all the scrapyards there are in America?
Yes.
Scrapyards, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Junkyard.
All the scrap that we from World War II that we all owned by. There was a certain syndicate of people, most of them Jewish predominantly, that owned the scrapyards. They made a deal with Japan after the war was over. They sold Japan amazing amount of scrap surplus was bought by Japan. You know why? Japan went in the automotive industry business and started making cars.
And they bought the surplus from here.
That's right, because they didn't have any way of manufacturing steel over there.
Very interesting.
People never look at history. They look where they want to look, and they look where they're shown to look. They don't look at the events that caused events to happen.
You know Trump. Do you think that the walls are closing in on him? Does he think the walls are closing in on him?
I think he's a tenacious individual who will fight his ass off to stay where he's at. And I hope to God that you know what? Here's my feeling on this whole thing. They turned around and approved this thing, and then they turned around and reneged on what they approved. Okay? So, now what happens? they're going to shut the government down until they make a decision. Now, when they shut the government down...
Did he say that it's his thing, that he's proud? Did he say to Schumer in that film thing with Pelosi where he just like a little boy had a tantrum and he says, it's mine, I'll stand behind it, and what have you? Did he say those things?
Hold on a second. Let me ask you a question. How long have we had an immigration problem in America?
Well, he's trying to hold that as a hostage. He's trying to hold a million people, 800,000 people, and the contractors and the people they do business with. You have them work and not give them pay? You furlough them?
Hold on a second. Hold on. I was just going to go there. Okay? They shut the government down, so all these employees that work through the government, or even people that are taking our national security here serious. You understand?
Right.
Everybody.
Airports and this, that, and the other thing.
Here's my solution for you. Think about this one. And the American people have a right to vote on this. If you want to shut the government down because you, the House, and you, the Senate, can't come to an understanding, well, I'll tell you what. We stop paying you while it's shut down.
But that won't work because he doesn't take pay anyway, and stop paying people that are making buku bucks. They've got it in the bank.
Hold it. Who doesn't take pay?
Trump.
Do the senators and the congressmen take pay?
Some do, some don't. There are some congresspeople that have stopped taking pay. But my point is it or is it not his shutdown? Was he very clear about it? I own it. It's mine. I'm doing it.
Can't shut down unless Congress and the Senate come to a pass that they can't agree on something. They can't agree on something, so they don't move forward. Something they already agreed upon, and then turn their agreement around. And
Wait a minute. They agreed upon it. 2 or 3 times they were going to give him funding for all of this, and he changed his mind. Pence went to Congress. Pence made a deal. Comes back to him, and he changes his mind. Jack, I think the man is headed for, I had a simple question. How do you think the end game will come? You don't seem to think there'll be an end game.
Has to be an end game.
Okay. In other words, will he resign? Will they trade off like they did with Nixon? You resign for impeachment. Will he do it to save his kids?
I think they should come to an understanding of what they're going to do about. I think they should come to an understanding of what they're going to do about this wall, about immigration. Period. If it was up to me, I'd shut the borders of this country down for 15 years. I wouldn't let anybody come in.
Well, do you know that most of the drugs that are coming in, if not 90%, 95% of the drugs that are coming into this country come through legal ports of entry? They come through the docks.
I know that. What do you think my father died for?
I started to laugh and call.
Wait a minute. Hold on a second.
How much of it comes to, hey, you get a little Mexican fellow with a 75-pound bag
whoa.
portrayed by those people that climb in the wall? No.
What about a guy called George Bush who was partners with Noriega?
No question. George Bush the first was. George Bush was still sniffing. When they buried him, 20 minutes later, he was still sniffing Noriega's coke. After the funeral, believe me, no question about Noriega, and that got carried down to Bush too, as well.
Why is that just glossed over?
I didn't forget. Let
me say this to you. Here, let me say something to you. And this I was taught by my father. Left me notes on this, and I looked at it, and he was so righteously right. Okay? 1960 was a turning point in our country in a lot of ways. Okay? 1960, a young man, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, is running for president, Catholic president, all this other. Okay? We had the Jimmy Hoffa problem. We had the miners in the Northeast were having a problem, difficulty strikes. And we transferred from gold standard to the Federal Reserve. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, they sat down, and they're doing all the audits and everything, and they're looking at the books of the banks when they're doing the changeover to off the gold standard. They're looking at all the books, and they're looking at all the revenue streams, and they say, wait a minute, we've got all these loans being made to South America, so-called agricultural loans, and we're not seeing any of the money back. Somebody's got to say something about this. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So nobody ever said anything. All of a sudden, 1963, there's a bank in New York. I'll leave the name away. Major bank. All of a sudden, the guy says, you know what? I think we have drug money in our bank. Because all these banks that had lent all this money out, all of a sudden they're overflowing with money. And the guy says, I think there's drug money. So they looked at certain accounts. They said, oh, my God, we've got cartel money in our bank. And they took and they exposed a matchbook, and they kept the carton. You understand what I mean by that?
Explain that to those who don't.
You're giving the matchbook up a little tiny bit of, okay, there's accounts here and there, and the carton is a huge amount of money that no one ever talked about that kept coming into our banks. Because the government was as much involved in the drug business as anybody was. The cartels could have never gotten as powerful as they are if they didn't turn a left eye and were partners with them.
Okay. Jack, what would happen if they legalized drugs and prescribed
Well, let me tell you, marijuana, they should have legalized years ago. The reason why they didn't is because they couldn't figure a way to tax it. Because you could throw some seeds in your backyard and grow it. It's a wild weed, okay? So they come up with this whole theory of how they grow it, and they've been growing it for the last 30 years, and now they have this stuff that they sell in stores that's so powerful it knocks your nose out of joint, and now they've got it all legalized.
I know it well.
And they're gaining a revenue stream beyond, but now it's so, oh my God, we got all this newfound money. Oh, it's great.
Hey, Jack, I was for decriminalization, not legalization.
Hold on one
California.
Let me explain something to you.
Through it.
I'm building a studio in Nevada, a huge, huge studio, okay? And we're going to build it out of industrial hemp, okay? Right. Industrial hemp, stronger than concrete, stronger than steel, and always was. But the steel companies and concrete companies pushed it aside years ago, and it never took it anywhere.
Hey, you could grow the equivalent of cotton without the boll weevil. And not
That's
put
exactly right. Industrial hemp, what they do with industrial hemp is all they get is the seeds that they're doing the CBD oils with. That has no hallucinogenic stuff in it. But the stalks are waste. So we take the stalks, we grind them up, and we have a material we make that we can build with.
Right.
And this material is better than concrete, better than steel. In fact, they're going to do cars with it. Imagine if we did all of our military stuff out of a material that no detector could detect.
But you got lobbyists from these big companies, the big drug companies. That's what it's all about.
Thank you very much.
All right. Hey, listen, we are up against it. This is going to be a pretty regular thing. You got enough to say to keep me interested, and I
love talking to you, Ralph. You're a good guy.
Oh man,
an open mind,
praise, my friend.
I have an open mind, which is good.
All right. Let's do it next week, and we'll go from there. How about that?
You take care of yourself, my friend. See you later.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jack. Thank you for listening, everybody. It's Comfortably Zoned. The show is Got Gall. Got Gall? All right. Be well. Thank you again, Jack. Thanks for listening, everybody. Adios. The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.